I still would not have voted for you because you're an Indian.
I think the thing that bothers me is, why the hell am I the only person in the Republican Party who has the guts to say English should be our national language?
It's because of the color of your skin.
I disagree with that. I'm going to be back at you, Steve. I'm going to hit you hard for that. That is because the rest of you are freaking lazy. If we go the direction of just letting that reaction guide us and say, yeah, I want white pride, and somebody else says, I want black pride,
right,
actually, we're missing the whole point.
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. In this video, we are going to be reviewing some clips from a recent Vivek Ramaswamy debate that has been really making the rounds recently. They discussed nationalism, got a little bit heated, a little bit weird as well. So we'll have a look at that, and then I'm going to give my thoughts on it. And then afterwards, we're going to have a look at Vivek's interview with Stephen Crowder after the fact.
Nationalism. It's a touchy word. You're not supposed to say the N-word anymore, but I'll say it. Nationalism. I don't think it has to be a bad word, not in the American context. But there's two kinds of nationalism that I think we need to distinguish between. Historically, nationalism has been associated with ethno-nationalism. Why is that? Most nations are founded on the existence of a single ethnicity, at least as the backdrop of that nation's identity, a culture, a religious set of institutions, maybe a religion itself as a state religion, a monarch. These are the things that have historically grounded the identity of a nation. Well, nationalism refers to the idea of effectively viewing the exceptionalism of your nation relative to those around you and your national pride as an anchoring of your own identity. And that's led to, I would say, consequences throughout the course of human history that haven't always been great as judged by posterity. You could think about single-handed dictators for much of American history and global history that have been defined on the back of being nationalist. Well, I don't think that that's necessarily the definition that needs to apply in the American context of civic nationalism. The beautiful thing about America is that we're not a country defined on the basis of necessarily a single cuisine or a single ethnicity or a single religion, but we're a nation defined on a single set of ideals that brought together a divided polyglot and, yes, even religiously diverse group of people 250 years ago. And so I think that's what's at stake in the context of being an American nationalist, is whether or not you're committed to those civic ideals. That's a different question from being an ethno-nationalist. And there is a difference in how American you really are depending on how long you've been here. And I think we ought to smoke that discussion out and have that open dialogue in a way that's been uncomfortable because of the Overton window that we accept around these topics. And I think we would be best served taking a truck and driving it through that Overton window so we can actually have an honest discussion about the future of where the conservative movement is headed from here, not just on the issue of national identity or nationalism or immigration, but more broadly. So, Ann, thanks for coming on, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too. Thanks for having me. That was a fantastic opening monologue. I, too, am a fan of yours. I'm going to make a point of disagreeing with you so that it will be fun. You are so bright and articulate, and I guess I can call you articulate since you're not an American black. Can't say that about them. That's derogatory. And that was a great opening segment. Lots of things to talk about there. Oh, and I agreed with many, many things you said during, in fact, probably more than most other candidates when you were running for president. But I still would not have voted for you because you're an Indian. We'll get back to that. And it's directly related to what you were just talking about. You know, the thing about nationalism, you're totally right. It is like, to use the word nationalism, oh, it's Hitler, it's Hitler. And you know, Hitler had soup. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have soup. Mm-hmm. Hitler loved dogs. That doesn't mean you shouldn't love dogs. So I think we have to move past this. If Hitler did it, it must be bad. But I do notice when I was listening to your monologue, I don't think I do use the word nationalism. I would use a word you used in your monologue, which I liked quite a bit, and that's citizenship. There's citizenism. How about Americanism? Yeah. I'd also point out that the only people who are not allowed to be proud of their ethnic group do tend to be Anglo-Saxons. Oh boy, you can't be proud of being white. Whereas, you know, watch a soccer game and see.
In my book, and I think that this is true with the American conception of citizenship, I think it's true of the Roman conception of citizenship, is it's about your loyalty, actually.
Yes.
To whom do you actually pledge loyalty? And so I think you and I share that in common, actually. I don't know, I've never asked you this, Dan, but I assume from seeing the things you said, tell me if I'm right about this, you're probably against the existence of dual citizenship as a concept. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yes. You and I share that in common.
Outrageous.
it's incoherent. It's not just outrageous. It's incoherent. It's oxymoronic. How could you possibly have a loyalty to two different nations where the essence of citizenship is which nation to whom you had your undivided loyalty? But the essence of American identity, I think there's a part of you that believes, I think you basically said so, that part of that identity is tied to a certain Anglo-Saxon heritage of this country, and that you're more American if you've vested into that over the course of generations that are descended from that, rather than somebody who came here with a civic commitment to the country, went through the naturalization process, and then their kids may, in some real sense of the word, and the reason I respect you is that you actually have the, so to speak, the stones to be able to say it, is that you think that there's a difference in the status of the Americanness of that person. And that's where I think I disagree with you, but I want to give you the opportunity to air the case for that strand of national identity that I think we ought to just smoke out and be able to have a discussion about.
Well, the reason I mentioned the natural-born citizen is I'm only talking about President of the United States. So obviously the framers thought there was something different about being president, the one man who holds one entire branch of government in his hands. It doesn't just say anything about who could be a Supreme Court justice, and they have a little more power than the president, by the way, or Secretary of State, or governor, or obviously senator, or any other position, but president, and I guess by extension, vice president. That is something that the framers did think was so important that you had this deep generation-wide loyalty. And why would they think that? Well, as many said at the time, freedom is a wonderful thing, but it's a very hard thing to learn. And one of the things, and I cite these polls in my book, Adios America, it's striking and depressing that lots of our very best immigrants just do not understand the Second Amendment. They do not get the First Amendment. And you take polls of them, you know, should you have a right to bear arms? Should hate speech be banned? And it's noticeable that large percentages of immigrants and children of immigrants really don't get that. And I think that is the point of having natural-born citizen only for president, that this is a really delicate thing we have, this freedom to bear arms and there being no such thing as hate speech. And it's just an additional little safeguard with the immigrants we've been taking in. Actually, probably any immigrant, but definitely 90% of legal immigrants come from the third world. They're used to authoritarian governments. They block votes. And every 4 years, I have to hear about how, no, I think we're going to take the Hispanic vote this year. I think we're going to get the Asian vote. No, you're not Republicans. Every election is decided by slight movements of the white vote. Now, the fact that the white vote is that close, yeah, okay, I hate 50% of them, but they're the ones who change their mind and look at the different candidates. It's much more easy to boss around people who have come from an authoritarian culture. And yes, take your point that this is, at least for this one position, president, you are looking at something other than just what the person actually believes. But, nobody really knows what a person actually believes. So why not have a fail-safe? I want to hear you say it. And I'd also be more comfortable if you're third generation and have some English or, British blood in you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand the view. I think I understand the view. I think it's a far less effective way of achieving the same goal. My question on the immigration point, though, is how do your views change on that legal immigration paradigm if we actually did a better job of selecting for who actually gets to come to this country? It
would be something totally, yes, it would be something totally, totally different. I want to go back to pre-Teddy Kennedy's 1965 Act rules, where, as I've said many times, I'm so sorry if I'm boring you at this point, pre-1965 immigrants were so much better than we are. We ought to be bringing in people. I mean, immigration is just a government policy like any other taxes or, import, export fees. It's just a government policy. It ought to be used to help the people already here. So I keep saying we ought to be getting our average up. let's bring in people better than us. And that's what it actually kicked in around 1970. So pre-1970 immigrants were better educated, made more money, bought more houses. Oh my gosh, did that change after Teddy Kennedy's Immigration Act? Now 90% of, as Trump says, legal immigrants are from the third world. There isn't that much difference between legal and illegal in terms of the cultures they're coming from. And why is that? Because at the same time, the 1965 immigration passed, we also got LBJ's Great Society programs. So if you came here basically at any point from, 1632 up until 1965, if you couldn't make it, you went home or you starved to death. There was no warm bath of welfare benefits that you would be sunk into. And most people don't know this, but about 30% of the prized Ellis Island immigrants went home. 60% of Southern Italian immigrants went home. So that's how, without having any laws or having to pick this one or that one, we just naturally got the best the world had to offer. We were skimming the cream. And I think when most people like Trump talk about legal immigrants versus illegal immigrants, that's what they're thinking of. They're thinking of Ellis Island but really what they mean is pre-1970, post-1970.
So I can understand Ann Coulter's point there. I mean, I'm Australian, and even if I was to get citizenship to the United States, I probably, not definitely, but probably wouldn't vote. Just out of respect, because it's not my country, but I would want my kids to be able to vote. There's definitely a lot of merit to the idea, especially with the amount of mass migration that's happening to the United States, that people who vote in elections should have been born in the country. So I don't personally see anything wrong with the argument that Americans would believe that somebody who is the president of the country should be an American Christian and should have some family lineage in the country. I mean, go to Israel or go to China for that matter and just tell them that you would like the next president of the country to look like Vivek and see what kind of a reception you get.
You suck on these little Chinese nuts. How'd that sound? So long, gay boys.
And this is why I think that Vivek took that really well, despite obviously having a difference of opinion. But just quickly, on a side note here, I think it's worth pointing out that Ann Coulter actually dated Dinesh D'Souza. And upon my research, I realized that Dinesh also dated Laura Ingraham. Who would have thought that our boy Dinesh from Mumbai was out here just throwing it around like that?
Naughty, naughty.
Bro was out there breaking hearts and taking names in the conservative world. I mean, maybe this could explain Ann Coulter's feelings about Indian men. Anyways, I think people are particularly offended about this clip because Vivek's brown. If she had have said to somebody, I wouldn't vote for you because you're English or Australian or German, the reception would have been very different, but the point equally is valid. But I actually don't agree with her here. And I definitely think that it would have been better framed if she had have said, I wouldn't vote for you because you're Hindu rather than Indian. Because his religious convictions speak to something much deeper, which is the philosophical foundation of his worldview, rather than just merely where his parents were born. So, I mean, let's get into some of the philosophical differences here because, hey, it's a Friday and I've got nothing better to do. So when Vivek says that he believes in God, he's obviously referring to Hindu scriptures or the Vedas. Hinduism is the third largest religion in the world, being practiced by over 1 billion people. And many say that Hinduism is the oldest religion in the world that's still being practiced, dating back to over 1500 BC. Although you could make the argument that Zoroastrianism is the oldest religion in the world. I mean, there are still people practicing Zoroastrianism out there. Fun fact, Freddie Mercury was actually a Zoroastrian. And you could argue the same for other religions as well, depending on different variables, like when the texts were actually written or formally codified, how much they're still adhered to today, etc. But that's a different wormhole. So Hindus believe in the Trimurti, 3 deities that consist of Brahman, the creator of the universe, Vishnu, the preserver of the universe, and Shiva, the destroyer of the universe. They believe that Brahman is the universal soul, which is formless and genderless. It's source of the entire universe and all of the matter that inhabits it. This is a monistic cosmology where they believe that everything is one and eternal. Christians, however, believe that there is only one God, a timeless, spaceless, immaterial mind that created the universe, giving it a beginning, a purpose, and an ultimate destiny. Hinduism is pantheistic, meaning that they believe that the universe is a manifestation of God and that God exists within the nature of the universe and that the universe and God are the same thing essentially. And they are polytheistic, meaning that they believe there are many, many different gods. Whereas Christianity is a monotheistic religion, one triune God that all finite things are dependent on and originate from the one supreme reality, which is obviously God. Hindus believe in the soul and that based on your karma or your actions throughout your life, your soul will be moved to a new body through a process called transmigration, which is how Indian society is able to essentially function, because the lower caste, or the Shudras, the manual laborers, or even below that, you've got the untouchables, who are the street sweepers, etc. They believe that if they have good karma, then they will be transmigrated when they die into a higher caste. But if they have bad karma, then they'll be transmigrated into a lower caste or even an animal. Vivek Ramaswamy is a Brahmin, which is the highest caste, obviously. Anyways, Christians believe in one afterlife, an eternal afterlife with God in heaven, ideally. Anyways, Hindus believe that their scriptures, the Vedas, which is 4 sacred texts, were divinely revealed to ancient Hindu sages. Christians obviously believe in the Bible. Interestingly, Hindus believe that time is cyclical and that there are 4 stages or epochs that continually and eternally repeat themselves. And at the end of each stage, declining human morality leads to the total destruction of reality. Whereas Christians also believe in end times, but through a catastrophic event where God brings about the end of the world. But interestingly, Hindus believe that we are in the final epoch at the moment of the cycle. And according to Christian eschatology, there's good reason to believe that we may be in end times. So, I mean, considering everything happening in the world right now, no better time than right now to get good with God. But the main difference, obviously, is that Christians believe that Jesus Christ came to earth as God incarnate, and that Jesus Christ is king. And if you don't believe that, then it's a significant and fundamental divergence from the philosophy that undergirds American civilization. And we're actually seeing this philosophical difference play out at the moment in conservative circles, with Christians such as Candace Owens making a point to say America first and Christ is king. And the reason for this is that they don't want people in power who don't believe this, because like I said, it's fundamental, and it actually seeps into all aspects of culture, and it also seeps into policy and international relations and so much more. So whilst all this is very important and it's a very complicated conversation, I do happen to think that Vivek Ramaswamy is somewhat of an outlier. Because first of all, obviously he was born in the United States, and secondly, if you just heard the guy, if you couldn't see him, you'd think he was about as American as apple pie. I mean, I don't know what he's like when he's with his family.
Mom, I'm going to be first, but Trump is so way ahead. Way ahead, man. But I tell them I went to Harvard, I went to Yale, they look at me like, okay.
That's really funny.
Hey, Vivek?
Hey, man, how are you?
You're Vivek?
Yeah, Vivek Ramaswamy. Good to meet you.
Hi.
Good to meet you. Yeah. What brings you to this part of town? Where are you from?
I'm like down the street, actually.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. So what do you do?
I'm a student. I want to play basketball.
It's fantastic.
So I strongly believe that Vivek Ramaswamy, if he were to be president one day, would govern in a way that is America first according to Christian ethics. And he wouldn't be trying to impose Hinduism on Americans. He wouldn't be trying to subvert the culture and subvert politics in the interest of Hindus. And he doesn't appear to have some dual loyalty to India. He is a true American patriot. And for that reason, I don't think that he should be disqualified in any way. And now let's check out his pretty heated discussion with Steven Crowder about nationalism. But before we get there, guys, if you did make it through that entire section and you don't mind smashing the like button, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already.
I think you would agree with me, because you both mentioned that people from different countries tend to, I use the term ghettoize, create these enclaves where they don't associate. And I will tell you, in Texas, that has happened with a lot of Indian immigrants. Now, I don't mean as far as crime, I don't mean as far as not paying taxes, but as far as many not speaking English, and whole neighborhoods where it is entirely Indian, including Indian markets, where you will go as an American and say, this doesn't feel like the United States of America anymore. Have you noticed that with this wave of obviously a record number of Indian immigrants to the United States for tech jobs? And is solving that a national language? Like you said, English, starting with, you're like everybody else. You have to get in line and you have to follow here.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the peers who I'm next to, and this is just not a deflection of what you said, it's just true, is I feel like most people I'm surrounded by don't know how to speak English either. Well, right? Yes. I think a lot of immigrants don't know how to speak English. And I think that, as somebody who tries to speak the language that was bequeathed to us, is it's a deeper point. I'm not just offering that as a quip. No, it's true. I think a lot of you have a lot of self-hatred of this country from immigrants who travel to this country, who then are critical of this country, who then actually are taking advantage of this country without actually pledging allegiance to the flag. And then you got 6th and 7th generation of, some girl of a guy who grew up on the Upper East Side, now moves to Brooklyn, thinks she's a hippie, and shows up at a Hamas protest and says the same thing. So I think that is a deeper issue in our country, where if we're just playing whack-a-mole, look, no one's more hardline on illegal mass migration than me, and no one's more hardline in believing that the sole purpose of immigration policy in the United States needs to be to advance the interests of U.S. citizens who are already here, right? I hate reciting standard talking points. They bore me. But here's a fun one that nobody, I don't think, has cited, but it's a fact. 12% of the nation of Sierra Leone, 12%, country of 8 million people, talking about 950,000 people, have applied for a green card. So this isn't just the illegal migration issue. It's the source of magnitude of demand of, if we did have open borders, this is what's going to become of our country. But Steve, I think the thing that bothers me is, why the hell am I the only person in the Republican Party who has the guts to say English should be our national language?
I know.
Why am I the only person who can actually offer legal argument for why we should be able to end birthright citizenship without a constitutional amendment? And so the irony to me is,
I can answer that.
Yeah.
It's because of the color of your skin. And I don't mean that, I'm saying you are inoculated. You know, for someone who looks like she's straight from the hip.
I disagree with that. I'm going to be back at you, Steve. I'm going to hit you hard for that. That is because the rest of you are freaking lazy. And
cowards.
The conservative movement has grown lazy. Cowards. People in this country have common sense. What we really lack is courage.
Yes.
So I'm not going to buy some BS that, like, my last name or my skin color insulates me. Think about it. I had to step down.
No, but that's the perception. You have balls, but other people won't criticize you.
But let's just level at this. We're having some fun here. I stepped down from my CEO of a company, multi-billion-dollar company that I founded, led as CEO, built it from scratch, wasn't born into money, and had a choice to do what every other biotech CEO was doing in the wake of George Floyd. Chose not to do it. Did not issue a statement in favor of BLM, because saving this country involves some measure of sacrifice.
Yeah.
So to somebody, I get this from white friends all the time, good-hearted people. It's like, I love that you can say it because I can't. My answer is bullshit. You're just a coward. Stand up and actually say it. Yep. Stand for your actual convictions, because if you can't stand for your convictions, you don't have any at all.
But the issue is no one else does say it. Right? We say it on this show, right? And then we take the arrows. Let me give you a very clear example. I come from Quebec. And the reason I say this,
take the arrows. Don't cry about it. Like, that's
no,
part
I'm not crying about it. I'm saying as far as the Republican Party.
Yeah.
The Republican Party. Why aren't they saying it? I am giving you your answer. That is the answer. It's white guilt. It's not.
So we need to no
their
longer
white
be
guilt. Hold on. Let me finish here. This is important. In Quebec, and this goes to Ann Coulter's point, the only people who feel they can't say it because they've been told they can't say it are WASPs in this country. Quebec, they created language laws. They had the language police to enforce it. And by the way, this was copied across the world. This was copied across the world. They said, oh, wow, we can do this because we want to preserve a culture, French, namely French European culture, right, Acadian culture in Quebec. And they created these language laws, which, by the way, were discriminatory against English-speaking Canadians. No one has a problem with it anywhere else except in white United States of America because they've been told they can't. Now, I don't subscribe to that, but I will tell you this. My frustration is everyone in the Republican Party, save for you and maybe Donald Trump, it's a white guilt thing. They feel they can't say English because people say, do you mean white? And they go, no, 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 no. And they're pussies.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to know what the one nation is that's spoken in other countries? Loan language is spoken in India. It's English. Yeah. So why should we worry about that in the United States of America when actually that creates coherence in our nation? And so here's what I'll say is, no excuses for anybody anymore. If you have your own convictions, speak your mind in the open, actually start standing for it. Don't assume it's somebody else's responsibility, and don't make excuses for yourself for not doing it either. Now, I'm going to make 2 points here relating to ethnic pride and nationalism. Look, I think it's weird that every other ethnicity other than the white ethnicity can take pride in their ethnic heritage. But if white people or people of a WASP variety or whatever take just pride, not denigration of anybody else, but pride in their own ethnic heritage, that's deemed racist. I think that's weird. But I think it's insufficient to just stop there. I think what we're actually missing is, why doesn't everybody actually start taking pride in the American civic heritage, right? So this is the way I don't want to see us go. I think it's great. The reactionary point is to make an observation that's true. It's super bizarre and weird and hypocritical and illogical and inconsistent for every ethnicity except for one subset of ethnicities based on the shade of your tan, which if it's light, a shade of your tan, you can't actually take pride in your own ethnic heritage. Now, I think that's weird, and I think it's wrong. But then if we go the direction of just letting that reaction guide us and say, yeah, I want white pride, and somebody else says, I want black pride, actually we're missing the whole point, which is we should have a shared conviction in American pride, which is what we've lost. And so that's, I think, what I see in the conservative movement right now, Stephen, is I think the left, say what you will about them, they will offer a coherent vision, right? There's oppressors and oppressed. They're good at offering a state of emergency, whether it's the end of COVID-19 or climate change. If you don't get it right by then, we're done. And we have fallen into the trap of just stopping. We need some of this to light the spark. It's a means to an end, as you said. But we fall into the trap of just making this as an end in ourselves to play whack-a-mole against the other side versus remembering what we're fighting for. And it's what's represented by that flag behind you and the flag behind me.
Yes.
And I think that conservative movement has grown lazy. And unless we learn from that, I worry we're going to have the red wave that never came in 2024, just like we did in 2022. And that's not up to the left. That's up to us. And I think that's something we haven't yet done.
Yeah, I completely agree with.
So there's a few things about Vivek that you've just got to love. When it comes to these really difficult conversations, he will just come out swinging. And also, he really is an expert listener. He's somebody who's able to hear objections, even if he totally disagrees with them, and handle them with utmost grace and understanding, but also be able to firmly push back. It's a tightrope that very few people are able to walk. But let's finish this off with a few key points from this video. First of all, Vivek is bringing back the Truth podcast, which is music to my ears. And it appears as though his goal with it is to bring on other conservatives and have conversations and debates and flesh out issues. And I really can't wait to see who he has on the show. Secondly, nationalism should not be a dirty word. American politicians should not be afraid to put America first and to be unapologetic and forthright about that. And thirdly, and most importantly of all, Dinesh D'Souza is an absolute Chad. He really is just that guy. He is the top boy. Just ask the ladies. Anyways, guys, as per usual, links are all below. If you haven't checked out my interview with Vivek Ramaswamy, you can check it out on the Reality Based Podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, all those amazing places. And also, you can find the rest of the links below. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, right here. And also, if you want to watch another one, right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.